The year was 2012. The world hadn't quite shrunk to the size of a smartphone screen yet, not really. It was a time when you could still get properly, beautifully, devastatingly lost. I was 22, armed with a liberal arts degree, a backpack that weighed more than my convictions, and a one-way ticket to Madrid. I was chasing something I couldn't name, running from a future that felt as prepackaged and uninspired as a microwave meal. Spain in the summer of 2012 was in the throes of law crisis. The economic despair was a low-frequency hum beneath the city's vibrant thrum, a layer of graffiti on a centuries-old wall. It was a place of profound uncertainty which suited me perfectly. My home was a tiny fifth-floor apartamento in Malasaña, with questionable plumbing and a balcony that overlooked a symphony of shouting neighbors, clattering dishes, and the distant wail of a police siren. I spent my first few weeks in a daze of cheap tinto di Viano, late-night wanderings through streets that smelled of sun-baked stone and fried calamari, and a growing sense of my own insignificance. I met him in the cool, hallowed halls of the Prado Museum. I was standing before Goya's The Dog, a painting that felt like the physical manifestation of my own anxieties, a small, desperate head peeking over a vast ochre emptiness. It was a portrait of hope on the brink of being swallowed. I must have been staring at it for a long time, lost in its desolate beauty, when a voice next to me, soft and raspy like old paper, said in careful English, "He is drowning, you know." Or perhaps he is looking for something. No one is sure. It is the perfect painting for our times. I turned. He was tall and impossibly thin, with a cascade of dark, unruly curls that fell over his forehead. He had eyes the color of dark roast coffee and a sketchbook tucked under one arm. He looked like he had been sculpted by the city itself, all sharp angles, shadows, and a deep, weary intelligence. He was sketching the archway of the gallery, his pencil moving with a fluid, practiced grace. I think he's just trying to keep his head above the whatever it is. I replied, my voice feeling loud and American in the hushed gallery. The whatever it is, he repeated, a slow, melancholic smile touching his lips. Yes, we Spaniards are very familiar with that feeling right now. He introduced himself as Matteo. He was an architecture student at the Polytechnic University of Madrid, though he said it with a shrug, as if the title was a borrowed coat that no longer fit. There is no work for architects, he explained, his gaze drifting back to the Goya. They are building nothing, so I come here. I study the old masters of space and form. We left the museum together, blinking in the ferocious afternoon sun. That first conversation sprawled into hours. He didn't walk like a tourist. He walked like a historian, a poet. He led me away from the grand boulevards and into the city's secret heart. He showed me a crumbling convent wall in the Barrio de las Letras, pointing out the way the 17th century bricks had settled. This wall has seen more drama than any telenovela, he murmured, running his long fingers over the worn stone. He spoke of Spain's generation lost young, brilliant people with degrees and no prospects. His passion was palpable, a fierce, burning thing, but it was edged with a profound sadness. He loved a city that he felt was failing him. I, who had a future I was carelessly running from, was captivated by him, a man who desperately wanted a future he couldn't have. That week, Matteo became my cartographer of Madrid. He taught me how to truly see it. We shared patatas bravas at a dive bar in Lavapiés, the spicy sauce making my eyes water as he debated politics with the old man behind the counter. He took me to the Temple of Dibod at sunset, an ancient Egyptian temple incongruously perched in a park. as the sky bled from orange to violet behind the stone edifice. He told me about his childhood in Asturias, a greener, rainier Spain. I miss the sound of the rain, he confessed, his voice low. Madrid only knows how to burn. It was there among the ghosts of pharaohs and the scent of cut grass that he first kissed me. It was a hesitant kiss, gentle and questioning, and it tasted of cheap wine and the day's accumulated heat. It felt like a secret, a moment of quiet rebellion against the loud, anxious world. Our days fell into a rhythm as hypnotic as the city's own pulse. Mornings were for exploring, our footsteps echoing in the narrow streets of the old city. Afternoons were for escaping the heat in his small, book-filled apartment near Atocha station, the shutters drawn against the sun, the air still and close. We'd lie on his floor, listening to old vinyl records, our limbs tangled together. He introduced me to the heart-wrenching beauty of flamenco, explaining the concept of duende, the mysterious power of a performance that gives you chills. It is not technique, he said, his coffee-dark eyes intense. It is the spirit. It is when the art becomes real. With him, everything felt real. He didn't just show me Madrid, he translated it for me. We'd climb to the rooftop of the Círculo de Bellas Artes, and he wouldn't just point out the skyline, he would narrate it. He'd trace the lineage of a building's facade with his finger from Moorish influence to Habsburg severity to Art Nouveau flourish. He was teaching me his language, the language of stone and history and light. One sweltering evening, we found ourselves in the middle of a protest in Puerta del Sol. The air was electric with anger and a strange kind of communal hope. Thousands of people, the indignados, were chanting, their voices rising as one against the government, against the banks, against the whatever it is that was swallowing them. Matteo grabbed my hand, his grip tight, and pulled me into the crowd. He wasn't shouting, he was just watching, his face a mask of sorrow and pride. "This is my Spain too," he said, his voice barely audible over the roar, broken but still fighting. In the heart of that chaos, surrounded by a sea of strangers, I had never felt more connected to a single person in my life. The day my departure date began to feel less like a concept and more like a fast-approaching wall. A shadow fell over our sun-drenched idol. We were lying on a blanket in Retiro Park, watching the paddle boats glide across the lake. "When do you leave?" he asked, though we both knew the answer. "A week," I said, the word tasting like ash. "Next Saturday." The silence that followed was heavier than the humid air. We had so carefully avoided this conversation, living in a bubble of blissful denial. "Okay," he said, finally, propping himself up on his elbow to look at me. "Okay, so a week." The plan was born out of a mix of modern technology's limitations and old-fashioned romantic necessity. My flight was at 2 p.m. on Saturday. That Friday, he had to travel with his mother to her home village, a tiny cluster of stone houses in the mountains outside of Segovia, to celebrate his grandmother's 90th birthday. "There is no signal there, Alara," he warned, his face serious. "Not for phones, not for internet. Nothing. It is like traveling back in time." "It's okay," I said, my heart starting to beat a frantic rhythm. "No," he insisted. "I will not say goodbye to you over a crackling phone line on Thursday night. That is not our ending." So we made a plan, a fragile, hopeful plan. He would take the first bus back to Madrid on Saturday morning. He promised he would be at the airport by noon. We would have one last hour together, one last coffee, one last kiss. We picked a meeting spot under the giant yellow-fingered sculpture in the departures hall of the futuristic Terminal 4. "You cannot miss it," he'd said, with a sad smile. "It is terribly ugly, but very large." He knew the terminal's architecture intimately, of course. He loved its flowing bamboo ceiling, its canyons of light. There was a poignant poetry in us saying goodbye in a place whose design he so admired. We didn't exchange flight numbers. I didn't have his grandmother's landline. We had a time, and we had a place. It felt pure, a pact sealed on trust and faith alone. Our last night together was tender and desperate. We held each other as if trying to memorize the feeling of skin on skin. "Don't get lost," I whispered to him. "Never," he replied, kissing my forehead. "I know the way back to you." Saturday morning, Madrid was a furnace. The air was thick and punishing. I packed my bag in a haze of disbelief. The vibrant city I had come to love felt like a stranger's apartment I was leaving. The taxi ride to Barajas was a silent film of familiar sights: the Plaza de Cibeles, the tilted Puerta de Europa towers, all slipping past the window like memories. I found the giant yellow-fingered sculpture easily. It was, as he'd said, impossible to miss. I checked my watch, 11:45 a.m. I was early. I found a seat on a hard plastic bench, my backpack a dead weight at my feet, and I began to wait. Noon came and went. The departures board clicked and whirred, announcing flights to London, Dubai, New York. People swirled around me, a river of reunions and tearful goodbyes. Every tall man with dark curly hair made my heart leap into my throat. 12:15. I started to patrol, walking a tight circle around the sculpture, my eyes scanning the entrance doors. The logical part of my brain told me the bus was probably just late, but the frantic, animal part whispered darker things. 12:30. An icy knot of dread began to form in my stomach. I pictured his bus, broken down on a dusty rural highway. I pictured 100 small, mundane tragedies that could be unfolding without my knowledge. The lack of a phone signal, once a romantic detail, now felt like a cruel, insurmountable wall. 12:45. People were starting the long walk towards security. I could hear the final boarding calls for flights leaving at 1:30. Mine was at 2 o'clock. I had to check my bag. I had to go through security. At 1 p.m., I gave up trying to be rational. I was just a raw nerve of panic. The huge, beautiful terminal, with its soaring ceilings designed to inspire a sense of calm and wonder, felt like a cage. I kept my eyes fixed on the entrance, praying, bargaining with a god I didn't believe in. At 1:15 p.m., I had to make the choice. I could miss my flight, a flight I couldn't afford to rebook, and strand myself in Madrid with no way of knowing if he was ever coming, or I could go. I could honor the life I was supposed to be returning to. It was the most painful decision of my life. My body felt like it was moving through water as I hefted my backpack and joined the queue for the security check. With every step, I looked back over my shoulder, my gaze fixed on the ugly yellow sculptures. The hope didn't die easily. It was a stubborn, desperate thing. Even as I placed my laptop in the tray, even as I walked through the metal detector, I was still looking back. The last thing I saw before the sliding glass doors closed behind me was the empty space where he was supposed to be. I don't remember much about the flight. I think I cried, silent tears tracking down my face as I stared out at the clouds. Years have passed. I live in Chicago now. I finished my master's degree in art history, a path undoubtedly carved out by him. I have a good job at a gallery, a life that is stable and full. But some nights, especially in the summer, when the air gets heavy and hot, I think of Matteo. I think of his sad smile and his passion for the stories held in stone. I've never tried to find him. In the age of social media, it would probably be easy, but I can't bring myself to do it. To type his name into a search bar feels like a betrayal of the beautiful analog bubble we created. I don't want to know the reality. I don't want to see him in a profile picture, perhaps smiling next to a wife and children, the lines of the crisis erased from his face. I prefer to keep him as he is in my memory, a brilliant, heartbroken boy on the cusp of whatever came next. I wonder if Evelyn made it to the airport that day. I've concocted a story that I tell myself. His bus got a flat tire on a winding mountain road. He stood there, helpless, under the brutal Spanish sun, knowing he was going to be too late. Our story wasn't a tragedy of lost love, but of bad timing, of a world that was still big enough to let two people slip through the cracks. It was a missed connection. And sometimes I think the stories that stay with you the most aren't the ones with perfect endings, but the ones that don't end at all. They just stop, leaving you with a beautiful, aching, unanswered question.